Good afternoon, everyone. Just doing a quick mic check, and then we will get this going. Let me know if you can hear me. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another casual stroll through Lord of the Rings Online. My name is Matt Elliott. I go by Scenario on the message boards, and I'm a senior world designer that works on Lord of the Rings and have been doing that for a long time now. Over the last 3 years or so, give or take, we've been doing streams where I jump into the world, go explore region by region, talking about the behind the scenes of what went into making those regions, and populating them and bringing them to life in Lord of the Rings. And as of the last stream, I ran out of regions. So going forward for a little bit, we're going to be leaning more into themes for these streams, with the first theme being the roads of Middle Earth. We're actually going to do a few roads of Middle Earth streams. The first one, we are going west to east. We're starting here in Ered Luin, and we're going to be working our way all the way to Ironfold in the far, far east. I think that is our furthest east currently. So that is the plan for us going forward. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the stream, like I said, this is a world design focused stream. So we're going to be focusing the conversations about the landscape design, the world design, the dungeon design of Lord of the Rings Online. I'm not going to be able to answer questions regarding things like lag, PvMP, rewards, details about quests, those sorts of things. Those aren't my area. I also tend to talk a lot, so if it's been a little while before you've seen me have a drink, let me know and I'll have a sip of water. So with that in mind, why don't we get this stream going? Manadler says, these are roads that, to be clear, go ever, ever on. One of the songs that I've actually I've wanted to learn that as a bedtime lullaby for my kid. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but I'm getting a little tired of singing songs from Frozen, so that seemed like it might be a good song to pick up. So let's make this a little bit more daytime. Alrighty. So here we are. We are starting here in Ered Luin. Let me pop open the map real quick. So our goal today, as you can see here, Ered Luin is here, and we're going to try to run our way all the way over here into the Iron Hills and ending in Yarnfast. We might there might be a couple of decision points along the ways. So as I'm going along, chat, feel free to shout out when you see me enter an area, and I suggest we could go left or right, or we could go north or south. Let me know. Alrighty. Okay. So let's get going. I'm also going to try to run it on just normal mount speed. I usually buzz through these areas pretty quickly because I'm trying to cover a lot of ground, cover a lot of detail as I'm running through these spaces. But I felt like, this is a good leisurely pace. I should be able to make it through everything we're doing in an hour, right? Maybe. We'll see about the halfway point if I need to get off my Oryx steed here and speed things up a little bit. So I guess one of the things I'll do as I'm going through this, I'll talk a little bit about the regions that I'm running through. Ered Luin is actually the first region that I worked on for Lord of the Rings. Way back in probably 2003, 2004, something like that. Doing the landscape design in the areas around Thorin's Hall. I did most of the northern portions. So all of these snowy lands, these were areas that I was working on pretty extensively to build for the launch of the game. I'm really glad that as part of this stream we're actually going to be able to go through the Ondershire, because that was one of the areas that, the Ered Luin itself was just kind of this little satellite region for I would say, the majority of the game. And then we introduced the Ondershire as a way to connect everything together. So I am excited about being able to actually, with a couple of teleports here and there, be able to go through everything. One of the things that, looking at these cliffs and whatnot, was our attempt at, showing kind of a beveled edge on landscape terrain painting. Make it look like the snow had a little bit of shadow underneath it, which I think at the time, 20 years ago, it looked really cool, and I think it did the job really, really well. Now it doesn't hold up quite as well because you kind of want a little bit of a crisper, cleaner edge on there. You want some texturing, and usually what I feel like we end up doing more so than anything nowadays is we have kind of a noisy snow pattern that we will put at the edge of this. Instead of like leaving this hard, crisp line like it is, we'll add like a kind of more like the trod on snow that's around the road here. So Dodgerfelt says dwarves are wasted on long distances, very dangerous in short distances, natural sprinter and all that. Yeah, dwarves. I what was it? I think it was at the PAX meetup. I was talking with one of the players there, and we were just talking about the kinds of characters we play, and one of the things I had brought up was that I often gravitate, for a while anyways, was gravitating towards hobbits, in part because I always felt like I was running faster when I was playing as a hobbit. Felt like I was always sprinting. All right, we are now in Gondamon. I did not do too much work in this area, though. I remember when we were first starting to build up Gondamon and how, it kind of represented a different sort of, I guess, keep for dwarves than I think any of us were really originally expecting to build for the region. I think Gondamon is a very exterior space. Like it is not a dwelling built into the is not a dwelling built into the hills. And I think a lot of people, when they think dwarves, they kind of classically think, oh, hey, like that is what they are. But I think it's interesting to move characters like that into kind of different spaces, move them out of their, supposed comfort zones, right? Like, it's nice to be able to have dwarf spaces that aren't always connected to a cave interior of some sort, because, they've got to live in the world too, and you're not always going to be able to do what you need to do if you're just in a cave all the time. So, all right, we can see off into the distance the mountains flanking around Evendim. The Ondershire's in the distance here as well. We're crossing into, or we will be briefly crossing into, the Elflands as well. I think when we were building this, we really wanted to make sure that there was a strong and stark contrast between the Dwarflands up in the north, the Elflands in the south, and then kind of a more rugged and, I don't know, like, abandoned isn't the right word, but a more rugged and wild space kind of in between the both of them. We usually were aiming for, when we were originally building regions, having, I think 4 or 5 biomes per region. Ways that as you're exploring, you can kind of find distinct landscape character in each of those areas, so you're progressing through. And I think part of the problem with that is we were pretty heavy-handed in those transitions. And I think that speaks a lot to kind of the more... Here, let's take a quick look down here. This is a pretty view. Kind of speaks a little bit more to the more theme park-ish methods of how we would build the game previously. I think that was how MMOs were being built then, And now as we build out regions, I think our transitions between zones, we try to be a little bit more thoughtful, at least within regions. Like if there's a biome that is existing within a region, we try to make it feel a little bit more like it is a natural part of that region's experience. Uh, Armales says, like the bird flock effect, it's very nice. That is one of our, I would say, like workhorse effects objects. It is something that we would often position it as you're like running down a road like this, and you turn a corner, and then you get the birds flying up from the trees in the distance, and it's something that I think for such a little effect does a great job of making the region, making the space feel a little bit more alive, because you still see, you see the animals and whatnot all around you here, but it's a little bit different when you see something off in the horizon. Um, so here we are in the Yondershire, transitioning from Eredluin into the Yondershire. Um, Regarding that bird effect too, that is internally, and now I guess forever externally now will be called, as when I mention it, we affectionately call it the bird cannon. Um, Whenever it just fires them away, fires off the birds. um, so with the Yondershire, this whole area was previously inaccessible up until a couple of years ago. We wanted to, in order to celebrate the anniversary for LOTRO, I think it was the 15th anniversary, we wanted to, as our present to the players, basically close the gap, because, Ered Luin had for such a long time been off on its own, and there was, in order to get to it from anywhere else in Eriador, you had to teleport into it. And so when we were thinking about what we wanted to do for the anniversary, it felt really good to us to consider opening this region up as part of the anniversary experience, and basically us saying, like, we haven't forgotten about this. This has been something that has long since the launch of the game been on our like list of like, oh, we really want to like resolve this. We want to fix this, and we just never really had the opportunity to do it. And so this was the opportunity, right? Like this was the chance for us to do that, which was really, really exciting, and something that I think a lot of us were really happy about being able to do. Um, One of the things as I'm like running around here, I'm so used to doing these streams, just zipping along on a run speed character, a higher run speed character, that like as we are just like kind of casually riding through here, I'm kind of like, wow, I don't actually think I will be able to make it all the way to the other side of the game world in the time we have. So we'll see how this goes. We'll see. Um, Maybe we'll make it to Breland, and we'll say, okay, that's it for the stream. Half of the roads to the east. Uh, I like. I think a lot of people have a very soft spot in their hearts for the Shire, and I think as much as gaming graphics has advanced over the years, going through the Shire is something that always just feels like coming home. Like you pop in, and even here in the Ondershire, which is a newer interpretation of the Shire, you pop in and it feels like home. You're cozy. It is a space that feels, especially once you start venturing abroad outside of Breland. It's not the kind of like welcoming space that you come across all that often. So, I always feel like coming back to the Shire is a chance to just kind of like exhale and relax. Let's see. Let me pop open my map real quick. Which way do I want to go? I should have gone up this way. Backtracking a little bit. This is how I make sure that we don't get through everything within the hour. I wanted to come down through the marsh. So we got to go this road. Alrighty. Don't mind all of my hitches. I'm currently on a local dev build, so it is hitching and stuttering every so often as I load in new things because it's loading more data than your clients usually get to experience. So let's see. We have Dodgertfell saying, very pretty, lush and full vegetation. Got to get up and check out that zone. It's definitely worth checking out. I think too, it being a lower level zone makes it easier to kind of get into quickly, so that's always a plus as well. Manathler says, question, who wrote the NPC dialogue for the Shire originally? Not quest dialogue, just things said by randoms that you overhear in passing, like the Hobbit lass who doesn't know whether or not to wear a green dress or the blue dress. I think that was something that just like anyone that had a fun little idea for those kinds of little color stories could do those sorts of things. Whether you are a systems designer, a game designer, just if you wanted to have those little vignettes, you could do them yourself. It was, we called all of that town color. And that was a major emphasis for us with all of these starter regions, is to make sure that the town color of it felt good, make sure that it felt like they were living spaces. And there are pros and cons to building those sorts of things out. It definitely helps the land feel more living, more grounded, more interesting. But all of those characters are individual NPCs, which come with their own performance costs and whatnot, and that's why we tend to not do the color stuff quite as much as we did in these kind of original regions, and lean more on color scenes. There's static scenes where the objects that we're placing are actually just entities. They don't have any logic associated with them. So like some of the patrollers that we have that just kind of pace back and forth, someone looking at a shop, a couple that is, sitting on a bench looking out over a lake, like those sorts of things end up being more about showing rather than about having words to describe the scene. And so that makes it challenging to set up those things in a way that you're selling the character of what your players are looking at. But I think it does help us be able to put in a little bit more detail with a little bit less overhead in terms of development, QA testing, and all of that. Because all of those characters, too, would then need, like, oh, okay, we need to make sure that we're testing to make sure all of the things that they're saying are grammatically correct, and then make sure those get localized. And, if the NPC bugs out, like, we don't want it to bug out too badly, those sorts of things. So, like I said, we tend to lean more into little vignette-style things with no dialogue nowadays than with the dialogue. Sam Burke says, I'd like the Shire better if it wasn't for that scheming Lothal Saxville Baggins. I think a lot of people would agree with you on that. The Sauron of the Shire, Lothal Saxville Baggins. So the Shire is another area that I did a lot of extensive work on originally. We're in Hobbiton and Bywater. I did a lot of work in Hobbiton. I did a lot of work in Mickle Delving, going up into the Binbull Wood. which is one of my favorite forests. Um, we just went through Waymeet, which was another space that I had built as well. Um, I think when we were originally building the game, we were all much smaller in scale in terms of the things that we were working on individually. Um, so that, our entire team of world builders would effectively be working on one region altogether. We'd just like split it up, and we'd have to negotiate. Okay, who's working in what area over the course of the development period, so that we weren't getting in people's ways, accidentally overwriting stuff, like those sorts of things. Nowadays, we tend to take on full regions for ourselves. So, like with Legacy of Morgoth, I did the regions of Amberol and Urashtar. Those were my two regions, and I built them from bottom up. Um, and it's just a very different experience. And I think one of the things that's nice about working in that way, anyways, is it allows an individual designer to really establish and build the character of a region in the way that they want. Um, because it can be hard when you have 4 or 5 people all working in the same space, trying to maintain a consistent through design. I think we managed to make it work um, in places like the Shire and Eredlu and whatnot, where there were a lot of us all working together, all on the same areas at the same time. Um, but I think it's just better creatively for a designer to kind of own that whole region. Because yeah, like I said, you can put your own stamp on it. It gives you the space to kind of experiment and try things in different areas of the world, and build how they connect together. And our current direction with how we are building our content for these regions that we're producing is very similar too, where we have, instead of everyone, every content designer all working in the same space at the same time, it's just one person now is doing all of the content for one region. And I think that allows for more cohesive storytelling. It allows for theming and whatnot to kind of go through, and it allows for the content designer and the world designer to establish a good working relationship in the region as well. All right, we are now in Breland. Uh, Breland is, I feel like Breland is kind of a hodgepodge region where we were trying to hit as many possible different themes as we could that made sense for these regions to have, um, which I think is very much, a is very much the Breland experience, right? Like you're in Breland, and um, you're reading The Hobbit, you're reading Lord of the Rings, and you really do. You hit like the happy farmlands, you hit the scary foreboding forests, you hit the cryptlands, you hit the marsh. Like you hit a lot of different things within this one region, and it feels like we keep growing this. But overall, the Chetwood style seems to be what permeates most in Breland, which is awesome. Um, because I'm a fan of forests. I feel like the Chetwood in general, and then the Old Forest were the start of how we really learned how to build things, and prepared us for getting to places like Fangorn and Mirkwood, um, and just allowed us the time to experiment. Old Forest had its share of trials and tribulations. So, oh, there's the bird cannon. The Old Forest had its share of trials and tribulations and remakes and rebuilds, um, because the initial playtests were people were getting lost too easily, which kind of by design, but we also, we don't want to have people bounce off of a given region, especially so early in the game. So we made some changes to help better the flow of Old Forest. We had one point an executive that wanted us to um, basically have road markers or torches everywhere to indicate where you needed to go and where the paths were in the Old Forest, and we pushed back on that because we did make some changes to make it more easy to navigate, but we didn't want to make it feel like you were running around something like the Bree Fields just with tree cover. All right. So looking at the time, and as enjoyable as it has been rollicking along on my Oryx, I do think I need to pick up the pace just a little bit. So we're going up to speed 2 here, which should help us move along. Gonna take a drink because I was reminded to take a drink. And we're about to come up to kind of our first decision point here. So we are here at Greenway Crossing, and I can choose to either go north into the North Downs, and then we will cross over the Misty Mountains up in Angmar, or continue heading east, and we'll cross over through Rivendell. So whoever in chat shouts it out first, that's the direction we're going. So, Bueller. North. All right, we got a north. So we are heading north along the Greenway right now. What might end up happening, at least for this small stretch, is when I do the north-south roads, we'll probably be coming back this way from the south or from the north a little bit, but likely because we didn't go the Lonelands route. Oh, another bird cannon. We might even do another stream that's called like the roads less traveled, so that we can check out some of the pathways that were voted against on this. Greenfields wasn't the Bree Fields was another like collaborative effort from 4 or 5 of us all working kind of in the same spaces. We had these lower fields here. We had the horse fields. The Barrow Downs butting up against it as well. All right. Watch out for large rocks along the way. I don't think there are any more large rocks. I think I got all of them, but I could buy one from the store and drop one down if we really wanted to. Tubmang says, why did you swap over to the satellite maps? I love the old Bree maps. So there's definitely a charm to the original style of maps. They look more like hand-drawn maps, which is very suitable for the environment that we're playing in. But for a couple of reasons, we switched over to the more satellite-based maps. One, over time, it's harder and harder to make those maps, those old-style maps, like actually useful. We can put some landmarking on them here or there, but at the end of the day, like if we make changes to things, it's a lot more art intensive to say like, oh, hey, this landmark that we had in this location originally, we had to move it, or we added new ones. Then additional artwork would have to go into, filling all that out, especially if it was, unique artwork that was, special for just certain POIs. With the more radar-styled maps, those are fairly easy for us to update when and if we need to update them. If we change the color of a cliff or something and we want to update all of that, we add new roads, we add new sections, kind of like what we did with the Wildwood. The top-down radar-style maps are much easier for us to maintain and much quicker for us to turn around the development on. There's also concern, like, I don't know where the original assets for a lot of those old-style maps exist. Hirok says, in the Shigana maps, there still needs to be new enemy camps like the one like Dunshuma. And that's something that we can file bugs on and get those fixed. I know I had several bugs before the launch of the last update that the radar wasn't updated. So that's just another case of like we just need another bug for it to get it resolved. And not saying that everyone here should file bugs on those things, but I would say if you see things like that on regardless of the region, if we've added in something and it is not represented on the map panel, then by all means file a bug so that we can take care of it. Sam Burke says, "I like the old Rohan maps because they looked a lot like the Asterix comics." And then see, I think too, talking about maps, the Rohan maps represented a difference in style, right? Like we had a different art director and different art team that had kind of come in at that point, and they approached those maps with a different style. And so that's where I want to go this way. That's where those trickinesses can come in as well. We have different artists, different styles, so then you get inconsistent style between, these maps and those maps. And the radar maps, there isn't really necessarily a artistic style that's associated with them because they are meant to better represent the radar images themselves. So it's easy for art teams, when art teams change, to reproduce that style than it is to do the kind of more painterly or hand-drawn map style. Let's see. Hirok says, "Were Cardillon and Swanfleet created based on the Greenway?" I'm not sure, or was the Greenway an afterthought in those zones? Okay, so the Greenway is a road in lore that goes down that way, continues on through Enedwaith and Dunland, and eventually to Isengard and to Rohan. So that is canon. And the exact path that Greenway follows, that road follows, varies based off of what maps you're looking at, because those are also all interpretations. So we kind of looked at what maps we had, what we had for landscape, where we've kind of teased the Greenway coming in, because originally in Enedwaith there was the Greenway running through it, and then it kind of went up to a dead end that was blocked off, and brigands were holding that position. So like we knew where the Greenway needed to kind of end out in. So it was just a matter of figuring out where in the path through Cardillon and then Swanfleet we wanted the road to go. So yeah, Tupbang says, "That makes a lot of sense, but after playing with the satellite maps so long, I almost forgot the Far Chetwood existed." I think one of the challenges with the satellite maps are heavily forested areas, more so forested areas with a all-covering canopy. And I've tried to think about ways that we could go about taking care of that issue. The canopy does a pretty effective job of obscuring your ability to see anything, and so that is one of the drawbacks to it. I have some ideas on how to address that, but those are like, here's a lot of work that we would have to do to change how we author our trees in order to make them work better with things like the canopies. Let's see. Ectodrohan, and again, I apologize if I pronounce anyone's names incorrectly in chat, asks, "You mentioned a while ago decorations. Could you make us some fruit-laden trees, please? Apple, pear, cherry, plum, etc." I think we have some apple trees for decorations. Icarbon introduced orange trees for us, so we do have some citrus trees available as well. So it's a matter of time. We don't have any like cherry trees, pear trees, plum trees, etc. But we do have apple. We do have plum. We do have orange. I think we have lemon as well, maybe. So I would say it's only a matter of time that we make them into housing items if we haven't already made them into housing items. Um, Baz says, "I love the Fornost ruins. I still wish we somehow got those canceled Fornost big battles in a new form." Every so often, I will find myself in the Fornost of old prototype space that has been built, um, and kind of look at that and think about like, well, what would we need to do in order to like revamp this and turn it into something that could be a playable space, whether that's big battles, probably wouldn't be big battles, but um, or missions or a region similar to Azanul Bazaar, a set back in time region. Um, I think with those two, it's really you know, so much of what we do for our landscape design and development is based off of we what direction we're taking the game in. Um, so like a lot of our ongoing game is currently sending us to Umbar, to Farharad, Shigana, and so something as big as what would be required the for like a Fornost in the past kind of region isn't really something that could be done as part of like a fill in the gaps region, right? Like we would really want to put a lot into it, do a lot of build behind it in order to make it feel good and compelling and appropriate um, for the game. A lot of our fill in the gap stuff is like often myself or another designer has like a little bit of spare time here and there in between updates, and we just tinker on things. And we tinker and tinker until we're at a point where like, okay, we're done tinkering. Now someone in content needs to design quests for this sort of thing if they are interested. Uh, Riri Freak says, "Are there any blocked, unfinished paths like the former Greenway Brigade blockade you would love to see become passable?" Well, I think the big one that a lot of people would be excited to see is the South Farthing, right? Like we've got Sarnford and Mickle Delving connected by a teleport right now, but I know that is an area that a lot of people are excited to kind of see built. Um, Often I see people talking about the Iron Pass, the region in between Foreshell and Angmar as another space, and just in general, like more Misty Mountain kind of stuff is something that often people bring up as well. So like there are no shortages of those places that we could break into, expand into. We have a road, I think, in Ironfold, um, in the Iron Hills, that goes north, kind of intending to connect to some portion of the Withered Heath and the regions up and around behind Erebor. So there is a lot of opportunity for those sorts of things. It's just a matter of finding the time and the you know right reasons for building them out. Let's see. Argaled said, "I noticed on Terrain Map plugin that there are some recently changed landscapes around Angmar and Ettenmoors. Can you say if it was practice or more news soon?" I don't have anything to talk about any of those areas. I know we've been doing a lot of work around the Ettenmoors lately, or rather Orion has, to kind of refresh that. I know that's not what you're talking about, and I'm not gonna say anything more. Okay, I think. Oh yes, I am going the right way. Angmar is another region that I had a lot of a hand in. Woo, boom. I think this is the, you know, when we were building Angmar, the kind of idea behind it was making it a culmination of all of the things that we had practiced up to this point in the game in terms of how we build camps, how we build instances. You know, Angmar was the culmination of that. So we have lots of big camps and big monster experiences, instances, lots of interconnectivity throughout the region. Um, so all of that is stuff that we had learned elsewhere in the game from building elsewhere in the game and put into application here. Um, it is probably also one of the most heavily theme parked regions of the game, because you bounce between places like, you know, the sulfur swamps and drylands. Oh, and yeah, haha! I managed to run through here without dying because I can't die. You know, this area here, which is just kind of like a war-torn valley. You've got the necropolis. You know, it is very heavily theme parked. Um, and these are all things that I feel like we did because that's just what people were doing when it came to building MMOs of the time. And I think we do better now than we used to. All right, we're in Malinhad. We're about halfway there at this point, and we've got about 20 minutes left to go. So hopefully running a little bit faster will get us to our end goal. I might go over a little bit. I don't know that there's anyone following me up at 3. So if I go over a little bit, it might be okay. Um, I want to go. Yeah, we'll dip down here into the necropolis in order to reconnect with the roads. This is another area that I had built, and spent a lot of time on, and it is an area that I feel like there was no end of headache in building the space when it came to performance. Um, in part because a lot of these crypt assets I think were built a bit too heavy, too complex in terms of texture usage and whatnot, and it took us some time to kind of massage them down to a point where they were, you know, they weren't going to be problematic. All right, so there is no real road to get to where we need to go next. So I'm just going to off-road it a little bit, see if I can find any paths to follow. Um, uh, Thalia Flourishing says, I'm hoping for an expansion in the First Age area west of Ered Luin. You know, Forlinden, Harlinden, I think, are areas that a lot of people want to see. I even um, the big landscape thread on the message boards, someone brought up Himmling as a place that they would want to go as well, which is even further to the west. So I think that is definitely an area that there's a lot of interest in, and if we found ourselves in a place where our storytelling sends us there, it's certainly an area that a lot of interesting stuff could happen in. Um, you know, a lot of people are really heavily invested and interested in the Grey Havens, but I feel like there's more to that region than just the Grey Havens. And I also think that there are some implications of, you know, what going to the Grey Havens means, because there are some story beats that we would want to hit in order to go there, and hitting those story beats could potentially cause some of the players that we or some of the characters that we've, you know, relied very heavily on for our storytelling to not be available to us anymore. All right. Is there a way up here? All right, we are going to shortcut this. With my magic acorn. This sort of design here is something that I really don't really want to ever do again. Lots of confusing impassability everywhere makes it just so hard to, get to where you want to go. Yeah, I think this is right. This is very similar to how the Troll Shaws was built, right? There's lots of one ways down, but no ways up, and it just takes a lot of time and effort to get there, and it's exhausting as far as making the way through. All right, let's see if there are any other questions while I'm continuing my run. Alrighty, we are about to cross over the Misty Mountains. And we find ourselves now up in Carbronach. I really enjoyed building this region. This is one of my favorite recent regions to build, just because it is a very steep region in terms of the verticality of it, and built very much in a way that is meant to evoke Misty Mountains without some of the challenges that the Misty Mountains had. I think whenever we go to build a region that is evocative of, and meant to be intentionally evocative of, a region we built before, we always try to kind of rethink, like, okay, what's the different spin we can put on this that is both going to make it a more successful region than what we built before, but also still make it feel like it is something familiar that you can kind of look at and understand. And this was also one of our test spaces when it came to the new world development pipelines that I was working on, how to use external tools to do our first pass height map, to build what we want to build outside of the game engine first, and then bring it into the game engine. And I think we have a pretty successful process for this, and I feel like these mountains feel really good. There are some spots where there's like a little bit more spike where there should be, and some of that is more the fault of how our distant landscape degrades than the process itself. But it's all just like stuff that we're learning, stuff that we're figuring out. Let's see. Lori says, I was in the Troll Shaws last night. Very annoying area in some parts. I agree with that. If I hadn't already, if it wasn't for the fact that I've already kind of rebuilt that region a few times, I would jump on the opportunity to kind of refresh it. But I also think that it is such a densely packed area in terms of content that making changes to the landscape there is somewhat risky, because that can result in just quest items getting stuck in things or disappearing in things, or I would like to make it more traversable at some point, but I don't know when that point would be. All right, we are working our way up these very, very steep mountains, but what a view. I think when I was working on this area, I would regularly park myself at the far end of that valley just to watch sunsets, because watching the sunsets over that valley was a lot of fun. Thalo Forishing says, do you find it becoming more or less difficult to stay true to the Tolkien IP as you look further and further afield for new Middle-earth content to make? I think we have a lot of very creative people and there's no shortage of creativity on our team. I think where the challenge is the further afield we get from the core flow of Middle Earth, of Lord of the Rings, of The Hobbit, the further away we get, the less material there is for us to be inspired by, to work from. Um, and because of that, that also means that there is less material out there for you, the player base, to see and be aware of and know how everything connects together. And so I think one of the issues that we're going to run into, whether it is continuing in the Shigana direction that we're continuing in, or when we are done with our work in that space and moving into other ones, is making sure that regardless of where we're going, we make sure there are characters and stories and locations that people can look at and be excited about. Um, I think a lot of people are very quick to say stuff like Shigana doesn't feel like Middle Earth, and it is part of Middle Earth, and a lot of what we've presented is through research, and it just is not the core Gondor, Eriador, Rovanian experience, which is, I think, very easy for a lot of people to look at and think of as this is the only aspect. This is Middle Earth. Everywhere else isn't. Um, and part of that too is because we're getting into unfamiliar biomes and unfamiliar, weird spaces that even Tolkien in his own writings has kind of like called out as like weird and unfamiliar. So they're like weird and unfamiliar intentionally. Um, uh, Karmopolis says, "Can a normal player cross from Angmar to the Misty Mountains like that?" Yes, any player can do that. There are a couple of crossing points between Eriador and Rovanian that don't require you to go through the Moria experience. The original, the first one, was Moria, so you had to complete your Moria experience for a long time. You had to at least complete the Moria starting experience in order to make your way out across the Misties into Lothlorien. But as we've grown the game, we've found some spots here and there where you can kind of like punch through into the regions on the other side of the mountains, where I just went through between Angmar and Kharbronach is one example. We have in the south, you can cross over from Dunland or Isengard into Rohan. In the Misty Mountains, there's a pass that will take you into the Vales of Anduin. And there's also another pass that is a one-way pass that will take you from the Gladdenmere, which is in the southern portions of the Vales of Anduin, over into Eregion at the top of the avalanche snowfall that prevented the Fellowship from crossing over in the Misty Mountains at that point. So there are a number of spots where you can do that. Will your character survive the experience popping out on the other side? That depends on their level. The lower level you are in a region, the more aggressive enemies are towards you when you enter into those spaces. So, let's see. Baz says, "I love the zones in Gundabad. So many great views with height differences inside and out." Yeah, I think with Gundabad, we looked very closely at what we had done with Moria, what we felt was successful in Moria, and also the kinds of experiences that we wanted to, explore a little bit more of in there, or new ideas for spaces. But we definitely knew we wanted to make sure that there was variety in indoor and outdoor spaces, because I feel like um, that was one of the key issues, I think, um, with Moria, is you were in the caves for so long, and that is fatiguing, and that's why we had Carbronoc. We had I'm blanking on the two other regions, but we had the other one that was attached to Carbronoc, and then we had I think it was Cloven Gap, which was meant to be kind of like an interior cave that was open to the sky. So we had all of those things in place to kind of help players take a break from the cave experience while they were in there. And I think from that perspective, we were very successful. I think it was appreciated to have that kind of breather in between the different regions. Um, and so I think that at least was very successful. I know some of the regions were not received. Some of the areas were not as well received as the others because the concept of them didn't make them all that uh, navigatable, um, which I'm a little sad about because I was like really excited um, for some of them, and I think part of the problem we ran into is like our map and radar system just were not up to the task of helping a player navigate that. If the map and radar system were a bit better, then I think the regions in Gundabad that people found challenging from a navigation standpoint would have been more uh, useful or more enjoyable. All right. Druid's Fire says, it's not that we were in Moria for so long, it's just that as soon as we got out, Maid of Lions sent us back in. Darn that Maid of Lions. And I think that is definitely a byproduct of a live product, right? Like, you know, we can't be making new regions like every single update because we don't have the bandwidth for that. Even when this was at Turbine, like we still couldn't have every update give you a new region to explore because we couldn't do it. Like there weren't enough people, not enough time in the day to do that. So we have to make use of kind of the space that we have. That's kind of why we did what we did for update 44. We kind of went back into the areas that we've been in before, some that we didn't really utilize as heavily as we would have liked to with the launch of Legacy of Morgoth, and that gave us a little bit of breathing room to build out what was coming next, to build out what's coming next for next year. We're kind of in this like we've got a lot of new designers on our team. We kind of wanted to reset how we're working on things. And so like this whole year is kind of about resetting and kind of reestablishing cadences with our new, reformed team. All right. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to, I might be able to make it to the Dale Lands in 2 minutes. So we'll go over a little bit to, unless anyone yells at me about it. We'll go over a little bit to try to get to Yarn Fast. We're booking it though. Um, these road streams might need to be 2-hour streams for a little bit, or we pause halfway through. Like maybe I should have stayed on the horse, stayed on the mount until we got up to the Carbronoc breakpoint, and at that point, then said, okay, we'll be back next time to continue on with that. So that might be the right approach to take. I'm still figuring out this format, so. Guarinda says, Moria equal Hotel California. Check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. And appropriately corrected to, you cannot get out. All right. This was a fun, I did not build this region. This region was where dragons dwell update. So we introduced Ironfold or the Iron Hills, and the Grey Mountains, Arid Mithrin, as part of one update. And we had one designer working on the Iron Hills, we had one designer working on this, and then I built all of the instances associated. And it was my first time back working on LOTRO in, I think, like 5 years. So it was kind of nice to be able to like get back and do some landscape stuff, but nothing so intense as a whole region. The instances in this region were a lot of fun to build, especially trying to think about using the dwarf assets in ways that we hadn't really used them before. Trying to figure out ways to combine them to create like unique shapes and whatnot that are just distinct and different from other stuff. And I feel like that's a lot of times when we reuse assets, that's one of the things that we think about a lot now is, okay, we're reusing this asset. How do we reuse this asset in a way that feels different than how we used it before? Do we have new textures for it? Can we rotate things in a different way when placing them, or combine them with a few other objects in ways that hadn't been used before to make them stand out, make them feel different? So Baz says, horse and breakpoints sounds better to me. A bit more time to go over things you see. And then perhaps that's what we'll do for the north-south road, is I'll break that up over a couple streams. By the time, I'm trying to think like where we're at as far as our schedule and whatnot goes, because we'll have July and August. So there'll be 2 more of these kinds of streams, and then at that point we'll be getting into probably about a month's worth of weekly previews for what is coming out with the expansion pack later in the year, if we haven't already started them by then. Because I remember last year with Legacy of Morgoth, it was a doozy of a schedule. It was, I had to, for 4 weeks running, I think 5 weeks maybe, we did preview streams, and then we also kicked off the Cave Troll stream with Alan and myself. So there was a lot of streaming associated with it, and I think that is something we're going to continue for preview season for our next expansion pack as well. Hirok says, would like a stream of the north-south road from Fornos to Minas Tirith, even if it's in 2 parts. That's the plan. Because this is kind of a new format, I wasn't sure how long it was really going to take to do these kinds of streams, and I think the idea of slowing it down a little bit, having good breakpoints in the stream itself where we can pick up where we left off and continue the road. It might even be fun, depending on what the state Bull Roarer is in. It might be fun to do some more community-driven, like escort the admin kind of streams too, where we're just chilling out on Bull Roarer if it's open, and we pick a destination, and it is up to Bull Roarer to get me there, right? So someone had asked about coding and who does coding in our game. Depends on what aspects of it are being touched. There are some things that designers can dabble in with code review, and there are other things that in general it's better to just leave up to our engineers proper. So we are now in the Dale Lands. It's a very kind of soothing exchange over from Arid Mithrin into here. You have that kind of flat valley that you walk into, and that gives you a much wider transition than I think people would normally get when they're going in between regions, which was kind of nice. That valley was originally built not to encompass an access point into Arid Mithrin, but more so in order to allow for the views for Durin's Day, right? All right, we are almost through Dale, and we'll be hitting the Ironfold soon. There's one thing I'm going to detour in Ironfold real quick to take a look at as well. One of my favorite views in the game, and something that I had seen pop up not too long ago in one of the either one of the Discord channels or in the forums, that kind of felt like it made sense to kind of revisit while we're here. I love the up and down feeling of this town. It feels like an actual town, which is awesome. It can get a little like challenging to navigate around, but overall the up and down feel of it feels really good. So here's a good example, like we were talking about before, of more like vignette style color as opposed to having text bubbles. I think in the old way, like this would be an NPC, this would be an NPC, and they would have words going back and forth with each other. But in this, it's still kind of imparting that same kind of flavor. You're still kind of getting the sense that this guard has stopped this, whoever he is, this merchant, from crossing the bridge and is giving him a talking to. So you kind of still get that sense of there's something going on here. You're just not getting the words to go along with it. Alrighty. So now, this over here was a blocked off gate that had long teased many people, and we did finally open it up, which I think was opening up stuff like that. I think is always a fun experience for players. You always get an opportunity to, feel like you are like the world is opening up further for you, and I love doing that. I think building Cardalon and Swanfleet were like huge for that, like opening up the world. And I think that's like my goal with the things that I build is I feel like, I want to build things that make it feel like the world is getting bigger, and you finally worked up the courage to get past that gate, to step past that gate, as opposed to the gate having been closed. All right, we'll hang here for 1 second, catch a few more questions. So let's see. Druid's Fire says, I remember so long ago when Corey wistfully wished that he could visit the Lonely Mountain when we took him through the Bells of Dale instance, and then years later he could, and it was so satisfying. And yeah, well, I think some of that too, that satisfaction of exploration is one of the big components for LOTRO. And it is actually something that we're going to talk a little bit about next week in our Cave Troll stream, is gaming as a journey. And so much of LOTRO is about exploring and seeing what is beyond that next hill. And I think that it's something that, even if you are not a explorer type personality, when you play LOTRO, you kind of get into it a little bit, right? Like, I know it's not everyone's bit, but sometimes like you just find yourself getting caught up in that moment of exploration. So yeah, this is where I wanted to stop real quick to just look out over Scald's Drop. This came up, now that I'm thinking about it, I think someone had posted an image of it on the Discord. And it was just like really, like this vista, while it still, you can kind of see its age, it still holds up, and it just this feels like exciting unexplored land to get to, right? And once we ever actually start heading further to the east, like that is going to be kind of one of those big like exploration moments for players, right? Like they can finally get past Scald's Drop without being rescued by rangers and brought back to a rally point. And I think that's something that's really exciting to think about. Like any time there is a tantalizing barricade, there's a gate that's closed that you're like, oh, I should be able to get past there. When am I going to be able to get past there? And then eventually you do, whether a story point allows you to do it, or whether there's a story point that allows you to do it, or it's just the inclusion of that region as part of the game now. That is a like super satisfying and exciting moment for players. And boy, are they going to be happy when I finish building the Iron Pass for them. Wait, what? No, I'm not doing that. Not right now. Not right now. Alrighty. We are closing in the Dynlick up there in the distance. This was a fun POI that one of our artists was doing. I think it's not often that we get to do big sculptures like that outside of Gondor. Like Gondor seemed to be very much just like, here are all of the big sculptures everywhere, and towering statues, towering sculptures, and a lot of other places and cultures don't have that. So you get these occasional opportunities to do something like that, and the artists will happily jump on it because it's something different and fun. Alrighty, we're coming up over the pass here. I love the feel of this region. I feel like we haven't done, up until this region was built, the game had not had this kind of like rugged, craggy, butte lands basically, and I think it feels so good. The world designer that put all this stuff together, like he did a great job, just giving this region a strong personality that, like, we could have leaned dark and dour and grim with it, and we didn't, and I appreciate that. I think it feels good because we didn't do that. Drew's Fair says, the gate in Andrath, the gate in Enedwaith, so exciting to finally get past them, except if you're lower level and coming in from Swanfleet. Yeah, I mean, I think Swanfleet was a experiment in how much we could push level disparity between adjacent regions. I think the important thing with Enedwaith and Swanfleet and Eregion and Swanfleet was making sure that there was a distinct boundary line. There was this line where, like, once you cross over this line, that is a very visible line, that it's going to be different. So yeah, it's something to experiment, that we experimented with, and I think we want to be like cautious about whenever we do something like that. I think one of the benefits in the Swanfleet Eregion boundary is that there's not a ton of stuff that far north and east in Swanfleet, so players aren't going to be as likely to accidentally stumble into it. So here we go. We have arrived. We've reached our destination. We've landed at Yarnfast. This was our goal. We're only over by 15 minutes, so thank you all for indulging in this experiment. But we made it. We made it from the... Let's bring up the map. We made it from Ered Luin all the way over here, all the way over to the Iron Hills and Yarnfast here in the east. So this was a long travel that probably would have run at least 2 more hours if I hadn't sped things up a bit. But thank you everyone for coming along the ride, for hanging out, answering questions, or asking questions and getting questions answered. Next stream that we do, we're going to do the north-south road. So we'll start up in Foreshell and start working our way south. What I'll probably aim to do is start in Foreshell and shoot for somewhere in Dunland or maybe Isengard to be the cutoff point for that stream. And then we'll pick it up at that spot again for the following one. So thank you again, everyone, for hanging out. Next week, we have a Cave Troll stream on Thursday, in which Orion and I are going to be talking about games as a journey, which is kind of fitting, considering we just journeyed across Middle-earth. So thank you, everyone. I hope you have a great week, and we will see you all next week. Have a good one.